Okay, well, hello. It's 10 a.m. in California. What time is it in Canada?
It's it's 2 p.m. in Eastern Canada.
Eastern Canada. And what time is it in Stockholm?
7 in the evening.
Okay, well, ladies and
Hello,
gentlemen,
brothers.
ladies and
Hello.
gentlemen, we are coming to you from three time zones, but one singularity, one moment in time. Welcome to Pandemania, Zoom style. All of us, all of us, and each of us is but a droplet on the face of this world. Wash your hands and face of your fears of this. We will survive. We are in this together. The enemy may be invisible and many, but we are all of us surviving, each of us. We are now all refugees fleeing catastrophe. The tree of life. In the center of the valley of death grows the tree of life. The bones that feed the roots spread its branches upward to touch the sky. Awakening is opening an umbrella just as it starts to rain. Well, welcome to Pandemania. Are
Great
we
to be here.
recording? Am I recording? Yeah, apparently I am. We're recording. I have a couple of guests. They're not my guests. They're kind of self-guests. I'm a self-guest. My name's Igor Goldkind. I'm an American poet. Uh, I have a book coming out called Take a Deep Breath. And I'm here with my friends from both recent and from far in the past. Gerald Arthur Moore, who is a Canadian poet, teacher, scholar, humanitarian, big guy, and has a son. That's the best I can do right now. And then on my on the lower left that I can see is Frederic Iriarte, the Irrealist, this French Irrealist artist, composer, playground designer, and
Monkey. You
and
ask a monkey.
a monkey and a Facebook troublemaker. So here we all are, and we're ready to go. I mean, this is it. This is what we're doing. We're doing something different here because there's a pandemic on, and everybody's in a different place. But at the same time, we're kind of all in the same place. But technology right now, we're hoping that we can all feel like we're in the same place together for a little period of time. So I see we're being joined by some people. So let's get cracking. Let's get cracking. Um, uh, what what's good? What's good about the pandemic?
Uh,
Pandemic.
Panic.
Igor, let me just begin here with the territorial acknowledgement of where I'm from. So I live here in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada, and I'd like to acknowledge that Moncton, New Brunswick, where I'm located, is Mi'kma'ki, the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people, the
What the hell
land
are
of
you doing there? Get off their land.
the land of the people of the Dawn, on the eastern shore of Turtle Island, where the settlers call this place North America.
So what are you doing on their land?
Well, I'm the descendant of thieves,
I got you there. Me as
and
well. I'm a descendant of beggars and thieves.
I'm coming from another planet.
You're on another. No, you're on the same planet. That's the thing. We're all right here in the same planet.
um,
Just
what's
a
good
different.
about the pandemic, Igor?
Yes, please.
I think we're finding out that the lowest paid people uh, are the most essential to our economy, and and that these heroes that we thought we had have suddenly shifted, and that the actual frontline workers, so these nurses and doctors and youth care workers and teachers and you know, they're the heroes, people who show up every day to work to make it possible for our lives to carry on. And we found out that it's possible to significantly reduce pollution. I mean, that's a real possibility. We also found out that at least from a Canadian perspective, that the economy deflates like a flaccid rugby ball if we don't buy all kinds of unnecessary things.
Wait, you mean a flaccid basketball, don't you? I mean,
oh, because of the
we're
Canadian.
primarily American here, and not everybody knows rugby, do we? Our audience is predominantly American, so maybe unless you give us a short history of the game of rugby, they may not know what you're talking about.
I will give you a short history of the game of basketball. James A. Naismith from Almont, Ontario, invents basketball.
There was a guy that invented basketball?
Yeah, with peach baskets. It's a great Canadian heritage moment. Every Canadian knows this.
Was he black?
Igor Goldkind. Speaking of Black Lives Matter, what an amazing movement we've seen arise out of the ashes of bigotry.
Oh, I agree. I think that's one of the positive aspects that's come out of this so-called crisis. That we got shaken up and remembered. Oh, by the way, America is built on the blood of slaves. You know, it's like it's an easy thing if you know it already. If you studied in school like I did, it's an easy thing to go, yeah, that's shit. Just like, oh, the genocide of the Native Americans, yeah, that's shit. And you just kind of put it on a back burner, on your moral back burner, and go, yeah, I know that's wrong. Yeah, all right. I've acknowledged that's wrong. Listen, now let me get on with my life. And what's great now is that this confrontation is happening. No, I don't mean just on the streets, but white people especially, are
everywhere.
Confront the reality of their own history and what it means. You know, the problem is not black people. The problem is white people. White people are the problem.
Yeah, and the institutions.
Well, how
white institutions.
How white people see themselves. My view of this, the benefit of this catastrophe of the civil disobedience is that white people they look around, they go, oh, there's black people over there, they're not happy. Oh, there's this white couple there, and we don't see our own history. We don't see ourselves clearly because we won't acknowledge the legacy of slavery and the legacy of racism that comes from slavery. Mm-hmm. And until we learn not to be good Germans, until we learn that there weren't any good Germans, and until we learn our complicity and to own that complicity, we're going to be traumatized by this. As a nation, America will never get better. America will never work through its own psychosis until it deals with this trauma, this cultural zeitgeist trauma of slavery. And the fact that even the people that opposed slavery, like Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, they still owned slaves. Well, not Thomas Jefferson didn't free all his slaves, even though he drafted an amendment in the first draft of the Constitution that would have freed all slaves in 1776. In spite of his drafting that amendment, he never gave up his own slaves. And that's the kind of racism that we need to understand, that just because you go along with something, doesn't get you off the hook.
Right. Okay. So from a Moncton Canadian perspective, if you were to look at invisible dominance in every institution in New Brunswick, you would see very few Indigenous members or Blacks or visible minorities who are in charge. There are very few teachers that I work with that are from a minority group at all. And so I'm in a particularly a white area that is developing, that needs more immigration, and thankfully we're starting to get that right now. We have more newcomers in Moncton, New Brunswick than just about anywhere in New Brunswick right now, and that's going to make us a much better community, a more solid community.
I think one of the origins of racism, apart from slavery, one of the problems is, of course, this idea of immigration, and the idea of immigration is always being framed now as a problem. The problem of immigration, even if you're left wing or liberal, you go, well, it needs to be reformed, and nobody's really kind of latched on to the meaning of the word immigrate or immigration, which is a fundamental human trait. It's something that we've been doing, since the bushlands in South Africa. I mean, if we weren't a people that immigrated, a species that immigrates, we would still be dodging lions in South Africa. Immigration is fundamental to human behavior, and this is something that's been politicized into a false narrative that somehow immigration has to do with officialdom, and it's not. It's a human spirit. It's a human trait.
I have this amazing student. His name is Otman Abu Zayed. Otman escaped the war in Syria when he was very young, and he came here. He eventually became the captain of our rugby team. So here's Otman's day in like 20 seconds. He comes to school early. He does all his classes. He captains a rugby team, so he's the first on the field and the last to leave. Then he goes to work, and he works at a pallet making factory in Shediac on the coast. And he makes 160 pallets a night till 1 or 2 in the morning, comes home, sleeps for a few hours, repeat, day after day after day. So he came in to meet one of my
Sisyphus.
He came in to meet one of my education classes at the university that I'm teaching at, and he was explaining what it was like in the war in Syria, how fortunate he was to escape and get to Canada, what he had to do to get here, the tribulations along the way, and his daily life. And my students started crying, and he looked at me, Coach, and said, "Coach, why are they crying?" So Ahmed, if you're listening, Eid Mubarak.
It's as a
The
poet.
American problem, I think, because in Europe, especially in France, people are used to cohabitate in 1,000 years, from the Roman time, coming from Greece, from everybody. I think America has other kind of situation.
Europe is much denser culturally, population-wise than America.
Mixed, yeah. All Europe is a continent of bastard everywhere. Everybody is mixing, Italian with Spanish, with French, with German.
As you say to me all the time, Frederic, racism isn't just endemic to America. You have quite a few racists in Sweden.
Yes, indeed. Especially lately in Europe, it has been growing up.
It's political manipulation.
But
it's just fascism. Fascism has always used race to divide people. It's a tradition. Because they're descendants of the slave owners. The fascists are the descendant of the slave owners.
But do you think I'm wrong? It's not many black people have been emigrating to United States comparing to what they have been immigrated in Europe.
They didn't have to. We gave them free tickets. We gave all the Africans free passage to get to America, and they've been so ungrateful. For 400 years. We transported them for free from Africa to America.
No.
Do they ever thank us? Do they ever thank us? No.
It was not free. It was the price of their life.
Oh, these chains are too tight.
Thanks for your hyperbole, Igor. I work with. I went to Haiti with this guy named Theo Landry. So we have this exact same racism and anti-immigrant sentiment that pokes its disgusting, ugly head out of the ground every once in a while here in Canada. My buddy Theo was in Haiti with me right after the earthquake. He's originally Haitian, He was in a Black Lives Matter march, a peaceful march out west in Canada, and he laid down in front of this car just to get his point across for a few seconds. And the people in the car were shouting at him to, get out of the way. And he got up and they said these terribly awful things about his race. And he had a water bottle in his hand, and he just kind of squirted it on the car window. And didn't they stop? And a girl got out and hit him with a hockey stick. The most Canadian of attacks.
Do all Canadians carry hockey sticks?
Just in case. But how appalling is it that I think Canadians sometimes have a better reputation than we are.
Yeah, but everybody does. I mean, Americans used to be
not Americans.
Americans
Not Americans.
Used to be admired for the wrong reasons. The world used to think the Americans were really efficient and really good at getting things done. Do you remember?
No, I don't.
We used to get wars done pretty well.
Well, I think you were great at the last year of a war.
No,
And starting them.
The first year. So the reason immigration is different in Europe, I think, than America, is because in Europe there are people in a concentrated place who have been there for 1,000 years, at least 900 years, and they're very similar. Europeans are very similar to each other, in fact. And hold on. So what they do is they make distinctions. They create distinctions because they're so similar. In America, it's the reverse. Everybody comes from a different place, so everybody wants to be the same. Everybody wants to fit in. In Europe, you don't want to fit in. No respectable European wants to fit in. You want to be unique and individual. You want to show your distinction, how much better you are, how much whatever. In America, everybody's trying to fit in, and I think that's that explains, I think, why in a country like America you would have such a high level of xenophobia and anti-immigrant feeling, but huge immigrant communities in America. Huge communities come here.
All America is immigrants.
Yes.
Yes. So, like a European, I don't understand this point of view, really. I'm a very, I don't understand. I think you're immigrant, you're coming from, mostly from Europe or Africa, and kill all the Indian over there, and then you said this is America. Like a European, I don't understand that really. I don't understand, not at all. And but this image you have of to be American, I don't understand it really.
Well, it's a changing image. I mean, the American identity I grew up with is completely, been irrelevant, redundant. The America that Americans are defining now have very much to do with how we cope with these problems that our leaders want to turn into a crisis. And if you look at, the best example of, I'm not even going to use his name, is that he takes anything that could be a problem and makes it worse so that it can be a crisis, so that he can assert power and say, "Oh, I'm the one who's going to rescue you. I'm law and order. You see, look, there's all these demonstrators, all these anarchists and terrorists out on the streets. So what do? You send in the feds to aggravate the situation, to create more violence. And then you go, hey, I have the solution. We lock everybody up and we get rid of the First Amendment."
In France, we said we have to divide it to get the power. So if people are divided, it's one is taking all the power. And that's the force of it, to divide people in groups,
But as artists, we have an obligation, a role to play, which is to alert people to the fact that they're being manipulated, to alert people to the fact that a lie just isn't a lie. A lie has an intention behind it. You know, Trump doesn't just lie for the sake of it. People like to say he does it. He's a pathological liar. No, he lies with intent.
Mm-hmm.
He has very specific reasons for his lies. And the fact that people are taking that in, even if it's ridiculous, is something that the three of us have an obligation to stand up and say and point out the liar. You know, the latest rumor that's going on that some right-wing fanatic has circulated, probably a Trump supporter, is that the vaccines that they're developing for the coronavirus, that people shouldn't take them because they will alter your DNA.
Yes.
This is intentional, that there is a biological experiment to alter our DNA. I don't know, into what? Maybe change us all into black people. I don't know. Whatever, you know, alter us.
Every one of us have 1% DNA from Africa. I just saw it.
I'm 100% from Africa. My ancestors go all the way back to Australopithecus. You know,
was that the tool user?
I could trade. I did one of those extra premium platinum genetic trace things, and yes. There's actually a cave in outside of Botswana that I'm going to go visit where my ancestors came from, and I'm going to pay a tribute. I'm going to go see if I can connect with my heritage from 1,000,000 years ago.
We were talking about a truth or the lack thereof, and here's a poem written by a girl named Emma Clements. She was one of my students. She painted the cover.
Cool.
That's Shakespeare's family crest. And here's her poem. It's called Unattainable. But I want you to think of it in terms of what is attainable now because of the force of this young people's movement. As sharp as the 60s anti-Vietnam War protests. Now we see something emerging even more powerful because it's encompassing a much wider mosaic of people. Unattainable. We are the generation of the irrevocably broken. Of friends becoming strangers, of lollipops and cigarettes, vodka and soda diets. We are the generation of the Walking Dead, of orange pill bottles, cloudy views, fake news. We are the generation of panic attacks, hollow eyes, skipped classes and skipped meals. We are the generation of self-loathing and heartbreak, hateful and lonely. We are the generation of the meticulously hidden, the beautifully lost. We are the generation of eyes that tell the story, tattoos that map our bodies, longing for something now attainable. Is that a great poem?
Yeah. No, I like that. Tell her that's great. That's great.
17-year-old at the time of writing.
I love the line, "We are the generation of the Walking Dead." And because there's a T.S. Eliot kind of resonance to it, but also because there was his TV show.
That's what she's referencing.
Yeah. Oh, T.S. Eliot or the TV show?
No, I wish it was T.S. Eliot, and then I'd be an amazing teacher.
But listen, the TV show is relevant. Why? Because remember the origin of zombies fascinated me for about 10 minutes. Because the original zombie film, you know, George Romero.
Right.
Night of the Living Dead. And more importantly, the second one, the sequel, Return of the Night, the one on the shopping mall. That was the horror. It was a the horror film. The horror was also intense social satire. You know.
Sure.
You know, and originally the idea was, look, you know, consumerism just turns you into a zombie, right? So message delivered, message received, but no, that's not enough, because not only do we because what we do is we gloss over the satire and then make zombies kind of like a thing. So you want to watch movies about zombies, which are supposed to be reflections of you mindlessly consuming.
And,
So you
and
know,
there's a pandemic element as well,
Bloodsucker.
right?
yeah, there's a pandemic. I'm sorry, Frederic.
Bloodsucker.
Yeah, bloodsucker. But
Uh,
the thing about American capitalism and the entertainment industry is that anything that is a statement becomes absorbed into a commodity that then in many ways defeats its own statement. And I think that the zombie TV series was a great example of that. I used to tell people would say, "Hey, have you read the latest Walking Dead comic?" Or, and I go, "No, but I was down at Fashion Valley Shopping Mall the other day. That's where I go get my zombie fix. Is when I go shopping."
maybe there is a comparison with this Dracula thing, Bloodsucker, and Zombie. Why do they have been so popular lately? Because there is this kind of insecurity and this kind of that you're afraid of, and maybe it's getting a reality. You know, you'll be sucking of the bank, sucking of the politicians, and people are like zombie at work and everything. So, you know, there is kind of a time expression
Well,
through the art.
if you've ever read William Burroughs, which I'm sure you have, and I think it's a Naked Lunch, maybe it's in Junkie. You know, he talks about how being a heroin addict, you know, he's a functional heroin addict. He needs heroin. But when people ask him about that, he's, you know, they say, look, you know, you profess all this freedom, and yet you are, you know, anchored, you are chained to your need
Yes,
for heroin.
yes,
And
a slave, a
and
slave.
Burroughs has a very interesting response. He says, well, most people have desires which are scattered around, which they can barely see or much less fulfill. But I have distilled all of my desires into one thing, and that's all I need:
Which one?
heroin.
John.
Ah,
Okay?
okay.
Hey, Igor, let me just segue into this poem that I wrote about an opioid addict that I knew and loved. She was a student of mine, and my teammate Kai Gosling and I drove her to drug rehab one summer, 2 summers ago actually. We drove this girl to a rehabilitation a teen rehabilitation center. It's called Driving Lisa to Drug Rehab, or Kai Gosling. Hatches battened in the head of the gale, white caps slap, the shoreline is a froth. Lisa's pasted speech harbor speak, the junk she uses. Casually mentions that her septum is corroded, can push her finger all the way through. Her boyfriend smashed out the storm door. There, a mosaic of broken glass glitters like the glowing Sargasso's highway to the moon. Dead-eyed corner boys swim past. Trailer park sharks, dorsal fins. Predatorial turns, always on their chase. She snorts a perk, crushed between two quarters to smooth the self-loathing of what she does to score, to quiet the monsters waiting in the depths, twisting gear, cutting nets, breaking oars. No markers on the big waters, drifting buoys, immeasurable borderlines. Blood promises evaporate with her body mass, like tall ships taken by Scylla and Charybdis. 96 pounds of jagged hip line, raw nipples that were pounded by storms, anchored tattoos have pinned down her arms. A hurricane shoreline littered with wreckage, the stanchions and beams of her ribcage. She pulls herself into the car. We cast off for our long drive, up the coast with wind in our sails. When we drift off course, Wheels hit rumble strip. Grind warning. I correct. Tuck back into my own lane, missing the siren's call. The rocky promontories that cave in halls. The crashing waves. The noisy gulls. In the rearview mirror, she thinks we don't notice as she fixes one last time. Impossible to know the damage for sure or what's under the waterline.
What's under the waterline? That's great. Thank you. That's fantastic.
Thanks, brothers.
It's a hard one.
Yeah, yeah.
Hard life for young people there.
You know, that story has an actual terrible ending. Ty and I went to her funeral last summer, and she never graduated from high school. And in her casket, Lisa's not a real name. In her casket, she was wearing her prom dress that she'd hoped to wear when she graduated.
That's a beautiful image, unfortunately.
But she never went to jail or something like this, or she didn't get any help or whatever.
A number of times, and I mean, this is the cost of failure, right? When we fail, students who have these types of comorbid ligatures, poverty, addictions, mental health, poor body image, whatever they are, the real cost is life and death. We had some great people around in our team, but I personally failed this girl. We just we didn't reach her, and I'm very sorry for that.
Yeah. Well, because I think there is in this society there is only solutions in putting people to jail. You know, you think different, you go to jail. You doing something, to jail. Instead of finding a solution and helping them to create and to find their own expression and their own canal of creativity, so they stop it. They stop the flow of a person. If somebody is a punk, let him do the music. Don't put it to jail.
Right.
And then
it's called freedom. It's called freedom. And people use freedom almost. People misuse the word freedom almost as they misuse love. And everybody talks about love all the time. They don't even know what it is. But freedom, you know, everybody thinks freedom is freedom from.
Yeah. Let those young people shouting and making high music and everything. They're going to feel better, and people are going to learn how to handle with them, and maybe you can find a solution to collaborate. I see it like that.
But first, the mind has to change, and we have to look at freedom not as freedom from, not freedom from slavery, not freedom from poverty. Freedom is freedom to. Freedom is free to be. It's not from. You're not running away. You're not trying to get rid of something. You are moving to liberation. And here's a poem about that. It's called Poetry Therapy. Everyone wants to be free, even from the things that once gave us comfort. We are like children who swap our blankets for softer ground. So why do you wait to be free when the keys to your cage are hanging right outside your front door? Reach through the bars with your hands. Stretch your fingers and bend your will around the bars. Your mind is your best doctor, best teacher, best friend, whether you believe it or not. In spite of everything you've done to yourself, your mind really does care about you and thinks of you, often, quite fondly. Just let your mind repair itself, heal itself with a few choice words, your own words, when you say to yourself, the truth is not a tombstone. The truth is not a judgment. The truth is a growing realization inside your own living mind, pulling you forwards enraptured by time, when my breath and my will are as one, the universe swallows me whole.
Ah, great poem, Igor.
Yeah, I like it.
It's an attempt to be therapeutic. It's an attempt to use language to get people to free themselves. Uh,
Yeah,
free them to be themselves. And I think that that's at this point of crisis, there is the crack in the fabric, the crack in the foundation, and an ability for some daisies to push through, that maybe there's some freedom that we can reassert during this time of uncertainty.
In Bill Ayer's book, Teaching Toward Freedom, uh, he suggests that we open up space for people, for students, uh, to ask themselves, who in the world am I, and what are my choices, and what are my chances? And he says the good teacher is the person who opens up space for people to do that.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean
yeah.
that's why I fundamentally
Education,
turn my back on
education.
education. I
Yeah.
come from an academic background. My father was a college professor. Um, I grew up fraternizing with academics. My friends are academics, scientists, art teachers, etc. But me, I don't agree with education just because of what you just said, because it doesn't open spaces, it closes them. And basically, whatever you have, well, let's see if we can squeeze it into this chapbook or this novel or this, you know, this thing that we can easily take a bite of.
Yeah, it can be soul destroying.
Yeah, yeah. And the good teachers are those who persevere, obviously, and understand what the true nature of education is, which, from what I've heard anecdotally from you, unless you've made up your entire life, it sounds like you got that. It sounds like you got that. Hey, who hasn't made up their entire life? Um, you
I've
understand.
been a teacher too, Igor. I've been a 15-year teacher too.
So how do you justify teaching when nothing can be taught?
Education, it's first you have to learn, you have to get some knowledge. When you get the knowledge, you have to give it to somebody else, and try to do your best to that they catch it. Maybe they can use it, or maybe can to teach it to somebody
Well,
else.
well, I think what you've said there is profound, because there's the nature of, and this has to do with phenomenology and the nature of perception.
Yeah.
The, the limits we often have is in trying to control the elements in our life. Now, information is power, right? Knowledge is power, right? But it's not unless you're exchanging it. It's not unless it's in flow.
Yeah,
Information
yeah.
information by itself is worthless.
I would say you have to open up the wisdom in the room. Uh, as Ayers said, it's not for practice for when you're old. It's a constant cycle. Everyone is learning in the room, and
Yeah,
if that's not happening, then that's not a real learning environment.
it's not real education. Yeah, absolutely.
No,
Um,
but that's why the power want to shut down all educative possibility, because they want people first. They want to dominate the education. I remember at the university when I was teaching, the big companies they didn't want to. They learn this. They didn't want to buy those books. They didn't want. They want to dominate the situation. Then they come at the politics. And the politics also, they say, no, they like now they took away all aesthetic and Latin and
everywhere.
everything is
They do
going away.
that
Uh,
everywhere. But
yes,
the reason is because education, real education that we're describing, is a threat to power. When
yes,
when you have educated masses, then they tend to make decisions and they tend to argue a lot and they
yes.
tend to scrutinize you and they tend to say we don't want you to do that. So for people in power, it's important to limit education so that
And,
only certain
yeah,
people have the information that they need to wield power and everyone else is distracted. because what the era that we're in now is the era of distraction. Because the way they keep hungry students who want to learn,
Mhm.
they
Exactly.
distract them with tests and
Mhm.
exams
Mhm.
and studying for exams, and they convince students that the road of education is really just passing these exams. If you
The
pass,
standardized testing has about as much to do with real education as life insurance has to do with life.
but it keeps, well said, but it keeps people preoccupied. It keeps students preoccupied, and it keeps teachers preoccupied, so that nothing can go out of control. Nothing can be out of reach of power.
Yeah, and media they want also to limited the education because the media they dominate too. They don't want people learn too much. They don't want to know too much. So they put stupid programs in television instead of interesting.
Well, I have a slightly different position because I'm American, and that is, to me, all media is good media. It doesn't matter. You have to have total freedom of the press. If the channels aren't open, then you have then you have the potential of oppression and politics. So even Breitbart, even Fox News, I would never shut them down. They
But,
carry
but
up.
what about something that's just spewing hate rhetoric, like a website that is like a completely neo-fascist website?
That's not very nice to say about Frederic's the realist. He tries. He sometimes gets. Yeah,
Like
I know.
like something that Trump would retweet.
Well, I think that the risk, the danger in practicing any form of restriction greatly outweighs the downside. I would rather have Nazis on the internet than not be able to than have Frederic be censored. It's just
What about somebody who's trying to recruit um, the dispossessed, the lonely, the weak, the young, the easily manipulated
I
to
mean,
acts of
stop,
violence?
stop talking about American voters that way. Look, we look, we got a lot of. All right, I know the question you're answering, and I can only answer for myself, obviously. But I am a constitutionalist. I really do believe the First Amendment is essential. Free speech is essential, unless it infringes on the life or welfare of someone else.
Okay.
So you can't yell fire in a theater. However, you would have to prove that the Nazi website really did pose a direct threat to the public good. And it couldn't be rhetorical, it couldn't be ideological. It would have to be, cause and effect. Look, this website made this person shoot that person. All right, then you
They
show.
do it through music, They use it in any way through music. Music, fascist music, punk music, skinheads
Hey,
music, they use it. And rap music with a lot of violence
Greg,
and weapons.
do you
Nobody
have
stopped them.
do you have
Okay,
any
but what
fascist music? Do you have some fascist music you could play for us?
Yes, in Sweden there is some
No, no, you
fascist
cover it.
groups.
You do it
but
some
what about
fascist.
hate that specifically targets a subgroup, like something that is very anti-Semitic?
Yeah. Well, you know how I feel about Jews. You know how I feel about Jews. Anybody that needs fuel for being anti-Semitic just needs to meet my family. Um, the 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 thing is that the Jewish mem or the Jewish identity has used anti-Semitism as a masquerade, as camouflage. So they deliberately, we're talking about the state of Israel deliberately uses any criticism of its politics.
But
Uh,
that's anybody defending itself anywhere.
yeah, yeah. They immediately say that's anti-Semitic. If you don't
Like
agree with Israel's policies, you're anti-Semitic.
like
And
in a microcosm, that happens in relationships. Like
and
in a microcosm, that happens in relationships. Like if you believe that person over me, listen, here are all the terrible things that that person did to me. You must believe me. It's from my perspective. But I need something that is like ISIL beheading videos. You wouldn't allow that. That's a little too far. You would agree?
the beheading was too far, not the film. The film is just a record of a beheading. The beheading is too far. That's
Um,
what needs to be shut down.
yeah, I don't mean to switch gears here too radically,
Go
but
ahead.
there's an interesting story that I want to suss out of you. And your dad fought in World War II. He was in the Rainbow Division. He was a Jew. Can you just tell a little story about your father meeting Nazi death camp officers?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Well, it's true. My father was been deceased for 6 years now. He joined up when he was 17 from New York, from Brooklyn. Uh, and at that time, he described to me an environment where everybody was fixed to the radio, listening to Hitler's speeches. So there was no, I mean, his parents didn't try to stop him. It was like, we got to go do something about this guy, about the Nazis. So my father joined up. He hated boot camp. He hated the whole military. He hated the army. He disembarked in Marseille, I think in 43. No, in 44, and was immediately sent to the front in Ardennes. And I'll tell you the first story. He never told me. He never said anything about the war until I was in my 20s, and he visited me in France, or actually early 30s, and we took a long walk between Antibes and Nice on the Côte d'Azur, on the Riviera. And I had invited him down when I was living there, and I'd shown him a good time. He felt really relaxed. He ate a big meal. We took a walk. He pointed at Marseille in the distance and said, I remember disembark. I remember because it was land. I was so glad because I got seasick the whole time. And then he told me some of the things that happened. One of the things he said was when they got to the front, it wasn't the front yet, because their army, the Rainbow Division was supposed to meet the Normandy divisions and then march on Berlin. They were supposed to meet at that juncture and then head toward Berlin. And the saying was, Berlin by Christmas, Christmas in Berlin. And then, of course, the Blitzkrieg happened. The Germans had these tanks. And suddenly the Allied troops, the Allied line was pushed back 100 miles. So from having just disembarked a week before to being towards, joining another army to take Berlin, suddenly my dad was 100 miles behind enemy lines. Now, my father was sussed, so the first thing he did was he took off his dog tags, and his officer, who was a green lieutenant, a West Point guy, said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, well, you may not know this, but if you're captured by the Germans, they have SS who look at everybody's dog tags, separate out the ones with Jewish stars, and they machine gun those people right there. So, I'm trying to survive." So this motherfucker, this son of a bitch says, "Oh no, you can't do that. You'd be out of uniform, and if you don't put your dog tags back on, I'm going to court-martial you here right now as an example." So my father put back on his dog tags, and as they're getting ready to confront the tanks, he puts an extra round of ammo in his flak jacket, whereupon the lieutenant kind of teases him and says, "What's that about, Victor? Is that in case we get captured so you can shoot yourself?" And my father looked at him and he said, "No, if we're captured, this one's for you. You're going to be the first." And he was never promoted beyond private for that. And then later after Berlin was taken and he was with the here.
Here's to all those young fellows.
And Fita. Here's all to the anti-fascist.
Drink it all.
No, but what about the censorship? We was talking something else before, so we forget some.
I just wanted to tell Art quickly the story about my father spoke fluent German and Russian and Yiddish. So during the occupation, after the Germans surrendered, he was with the occupying army in Munich, and they were rounding up. And Auschwitz had just been liberated, so people were like really they're just coming to grips with it. So he was supposed to be a translator. He was a guard. He was a private, but because he spoke German fluently, they used him to, help the people that were rounding, the Germans they round up. So he told me about sitting in the waiting room where they brought in three Germans, officers, completely disheveled. They'd found them in the woods. But he could tell, told me, he could tell from the patent letter and he could tell from the insignia on their uniforms that they were high-ranking. And they were high-ranking Nazi officers. So he just stood there, they were sitting, and he said the three of them were shaking, uncontrollably shaking, out of fear and everything else. They were shaking. And my father, the poor bastard, he felt sorry for him. So he said to them in German, he said, you got nothing to worry about. The war is over. They're just going to ask you questions, and then you're probably going to be back home with your families in a month. America, he was trying to reassure
them. Just go back 2 sentences because you drifted out.
Yeah, he tried to reassure them. He said, look, the American army isn't going to, they want to process you. They're just going to ask you questions, and then they're going to send you home. You'll be with your families in a month. So there's nothing to really be that panicked about. And he was trying to help them. He was trying to calm them down and explain that the American military did not just summarily execute their prisoners. But these guys didn't stop. They understood German. They didn't stop shaking. And he told me later, he found out, of course, that they were the commandant and the assistants of Auschwitz. And so they knew that they weren't going to be seeing their families in a month. They knew they were in big trouble. But I mean, to me that anecdote it really shows the bridge or the gap in humanity that we're facing today. And there really are the people who are responsible for how we have arrived at where we are. And we might be sympathetic now that they've lost, now that they're losing everything. We might feel sorry for Donald Trump after they convict him and put him in jail. But the fact is that, they did it to themselves. They did it to themselves, and they did it to us. And they're doing it to us. So we really do have to. Liberals tend to be too sentimental. Liberals need to be a little less forgiving. We need to step up and accuse, like Zola. We need to.
Isn't that what's happening with these movements right now?
Yes.
That what's happening with the protests?
Yes, and that's because the young black people, especially, haven't grown up in this generation of complacency. They haven't learned how to get along because they've seen their parents try to get along and still be fucked, still be screwed. So they're going, But what they are doing, what people are doing is reaching across, the young people especially, reaching across these artificial divides, generational divides. So when I go to a Black Lives Matter rally, it's not just cross-race, it's also cross-generational. It's a lot of people with the same beef. And the beef is what the fascists are trying to do to our country and trying to do to the world. And by the way, make no mistake for anybody who's listening, Donald Trump is a Nazi by every definition of the term. He does exactly what fascists do. He lies, he confuses, he creates division. He every time a problem arises that people can identify, he distracts. This is all standard Nazi tactics. So, or fascist or Francoist, the point is that America, we're in a historical deficit, education deficit, because we're of the generation now doesn't have that direct connection to World War II that kind of was the safety valve in case any fascists try to rise up again. That's faded. That familiarity is faded. So people now don't realize they haven't been exposed to this kind of thing before. They don't realize it's happened before.
America and the world just lost the great civil rights leader, John Lewis.
Rest in peace. Yeah, yeah.
I was certainly thinking about the movement, all civil rights movements, especially his perspective with passivity. What are your thoughts on that, Igor?
I'm sorry, on what?
On a peaceful protest.
Well, let people use language and usually to further their own agenda. I don't know any protest that's been absolutely peaceful that's done anything. I mean, if you want to get a bunch of people just kind of marching around with signs, hey, I organized a peaceful protest at my high school and I got expelled for doing it. So, it's not really about the measuring litmus levels of violence. What it's about is whether the point is getting across.
Right.
And the point is about police brutality, and it's also about the end to institutional racism. And the majority of Americans and a majority of people in the world have just had enough. We've had enough. We've grown up in racist societies. We don't want to anymore. We don't want our children to. Racism is just redundant. It just needs to be bypassed. And by the way, if you're still a racist, fuck you and get out of the way.
Okay, where is the art in all this? Well, I'm not so engaged in the politics. Even if art is politics, somehow.
If art isn't politics, then you're not doing it right. All art is politics. All art. The act of creating art is a political act.
I rather say the philosophic and politic.
Well, you tell me. What do you think, Frederic? What do you think of the social changes that we're all looking at now? We're all facing.
I just wondering, and since people are people, since 7,000 and 100,000 years, nobody find any solution. It was always a problem. Civilization every time and point of view, but they don't find any solution. I think the solution is in the discussion.
Yes.
Like poet and artists, they're opening question. Even sometimes it's not nice to listen to those questions or to hear those questions, but to be discussed. And as quick as they stop you to discuss, the possibility to discuss, that's a big problem, freedom of speech, media manipulation, newspaper manipulation, political manipulation, and industrial and artwork. They didn't follow. There is always somebody who wants to take over,
Yeah, but there is always somebody who wants to take over. The point is, do we have a consensus system that allows everybody a chance? Or do only certain people get to take over?
That's what I did like in Facebook, for example, at the beginning, that you have the possibility to express yourself, to share it with people they understand and you can communicate, I did like Facebook at the beginning, but now they cut all the possibilities, they shut me down 6 months now in Facebook.
Well, explain what happened to you.
But first, they took away 140 of my artworks, and they are not at all sex. There is no sex, no political issues, or no inconvenient either. But they just took away.
Why are they worth looking at?
I don't know, because there was maybe popular and they want to get paid, or I don't know. But they too, because I wrote that who has the copyrights and there is copyright protected and everything, and they want to own all my publication, and I did not accept that first. And then they took away 140 of my artworks, and then they took away about 20 of my art videos, and took away my books. They but just took away without telling anything. And then now they don't allow me to share my email and my official web page, neither in Facebook or Messenger. And for no reason, they don't give any reason. And I don't understand, because it's not inside the policy to shut down people that they are
Look,
not making problem.
I called Facebook on your behalf. I talked to Robert Zuckerberg, and he told me he didn't want me to say, he didn't want me to tell you. He just said they just don't like your work. It's just not their style. So
No,
they've got aesthetic criteria. They just
maybe
decided that you weren't good enough.
maybe
This
because I'm
poem,
working with poets. Maybe because I'm working with poets.
Yeah, it's because you waste
this,
too much time with poets. That's why.
this poem is called Open Wound. Uh,
Okay.
it has nothing to do with what you were talking about. I just wanted to stop it.
Good,
Oh, okay.
Uh,
good. Thank you.
this about this is a poem. Open Wound. Yellowing apples underneath low branches, fermenting, attracting deer and honeybees. Further down the clear cut, they're burning, turning orchards to floodplains, smoking stumps, slow to disintegrate, hold their heat for days. In slow pirouettes of smoke, a mule deer, something wrong, the way she shuffles, awkward, unnatural, circling the cut, inside shadowed tree line, careful outstep, creeping. I'm quiet. Upwind, but that fire is going to cancel out my scent. Drift deeper, then arc back out to the edge of my imaginary clover leaf. Slowly emerge, keeping the morning sun in her eyes. That's when I see it. Just above her wet, cambered shoulder, a concave exit wound like a cereal bowl. Writhing worms periodically fall, tapping leaf litter like heavy raindrops. The smoke keeping cluster flies at bay, meat bees from feasting. Maggots, at least, are cleaning this old gunshot. She's near the end, slowly lifts her head when she hears. Tired glass eyes. I understand. Unsling and curse the motherfuckers who left us like this.
Curse the motherfuckers. Definitely. All right, I'm going to go with this because of the times we're in, and I heard somebody say on the news or Facebook, somewhere through the screen, somewhere beyond the screen, saying that really, the challenge that we all have, artists, poets, and the people, all of us have, is that we really do have to step up and assume the maturity necessary to deal with uncertainty. That's really what is missing is that people are feeling a lack of confidence in themselves. And as artists, we have an ability to unlock those keys to unlock those locks with that triggering of one's own sense of self. I say it better this way: becoming. I say it better this way: being is becoming still. Existence is a limitless screen of emptiness, interrupted by jubilant celebrations and gratitude for the joy in rolling a boulder blissfully up this steep hill again. Tripping over our own thoughts like loosened cobblestones, we no longer see the reality directly in front of us. The truth is a truce we struck with certainty ages ago, after losing our desperate grip on some kind of hope buried deep beneath our roots. I am fearful of fully failing myself, and yet I love myself best when I am alone with eternity. And I say this now because each of us are alone with eternity, and that is strength. You know, when it comes to it, the social consequence, the context, even our physical ability to survive is nothing compared to that singular fact of existence that we either embrace or we run away from. Mm-hmm. And now we have an opportunity where people are seeing a lot of what's fallen away, a lot of what's unavailable to us are things that really are distractions. You know, I mean, you know, I love going to having a beer after I've worked all day in a bar, and I love that. That's convenient for me. That's nice for me. Now I can't do that unless I'm sitting outside. Well, you know, so fucking what? You know, it's okay. So I adapt. And I believe what we all have in common here, and I believe what artists can share with our public is that there are problems. They're not a crisis. There are problems that need to be solved. The pandemic is a problem. There are scientists who are developing vaccines that will solve this problem. Racism is a problem, okay? But there are people working now to solve that problem. Our enemies will turn a problem into a crisis. They will make the problem worse so that people are overwhelmed and scared. And then they can say, I've got the solution. Here, give me the power. I'll solve it for you. And that's where we are now. That's the risk right now, is that people are willing to surrender their agency out of fear because because other people are lying, because the powerful and the greedy are lying and saying that they have answers, and all of their answers have to do with more power for them. So we have an obligation as artists to re-empower our audience and remind them that they, you, me, each of us, we are the source of our power.
Yeah, about eternity, good art should be eternal.
It is. Good art is eternal. It sticks around. It sticks around. People.
I don't know about my job as an artist, but I do know that here we have this great vote, and you have an election coming up in November, and it's time, hopefully, to get these employees of ours to do their job. And gosh, from the north, Igor, we're certainly like hoisting a hockey stick and a glass and a maple leaf and a chug of
I'm glad your thoughts and prayers are with us. I'm glad your thoughts and prayers are with us.
We are just hoping, not thoughts and prayers, but it has been a long ride.
No,
with our best friend to the south, and having to endure the nonsense of these last years.
Hey, try living with them. Try living with them. You know?
But look,
you just live upstairs. I'm on the ground floor, man. I'm on the ground floor. And
You asked what good came of the pandemic,
yeah,
and you weren't talking about Trump. You were talking about the virus, but if I think of them both strangely interwoven,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and I hope that we'll be able to rid ourselves with both of them with this vaccine of love that is being incarnated as we speak, and it is growing with the youth of your nation and mine, and is being coupled with the experience of those protesters from the past, and in the great spirit of your civil rights icon, John Lewis, and even up in Canada, we paused and thought about him.
Hey, for every Donald Trump, there's 1,000 John Lewises. That's the thing you got to remember about America. Because we try to maintain this pluralistic democracy, we let the bad guys get their turn. And the reason we do is because, unlike the bad guys, the fascists, we understand that that the outcome of an election that follows the law is more important than who wins. And
Yes,
this is where Donald diverts from the
ideally.
law. You know, he doesn't. He just wants to win. He doesn't. He's a businessman. He just wants to win. Doesn't matter if he has to break the law to win, right? Well, Americans realize that, as I said, the outcome of the election is not as important as that the process is democratic and legit. And right now, Donald Trump is trying to sow these seeds of doubt and discord because he knows he's going to lose. So his only chance is to try to create some fog, to try to generate some fog at the time election results, so that he can hold on to his power to the last very moment. But he won't win. He won't win, and he'll be exited out of the White House. There won't be a fascist coup, full coup in America quite yet. This is the closest we've got, but we still, as you said, in 2 months, we're going to get rid of it.
Hey,
Yeah.
let me sidestep and jump back for one moment.
Sure.
We have a lot of our RCMP members, of law enforcement members who are just and noble, and I would just like to say is completely enlightened to support our great, our good, our best first responders, our women and men who arrive when we're in need. I mean, you should not keep those things totally separate. That there are like these important first responders that are doing their job.
I hear what you're saying.
In this typhoon, they're becoming overwhelmed, and I just want them to know.
But that's part of the process. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
it is part of the process.
Hero. The word hero is the loaded word here. Don't ever call people heroes, because we know what the Greeks did to theirs.
Did I do that?
Do what?
Did I call them heroes?
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, not just you. You called our first responders heroes, heroic. There's also the first responders bill, which is the heroes bill. And I'm just saying, be careful of the resonance of that term, hero.
Let me just say that our good women and men that are in those roles.
Yeah, I understand, but my literary point is that Greek heroes always got torn apart at the end of their myth. Heroes get destroyed. People make heroes and then destroy them. So the resonance is, let's not call them heroes. Let's just call them good people, like you said. Let's not load the gun unnecessarily.
On them in the Greco-Roman tragedy sort of way. Anyway, I just I think that it's not separate to want those people to be recognized for their valiant work, the same as our doctors and nurses and all the people that are making the system work, and to also be an advocate for social justice. In fact,
you can't do one without the other.
We need Indigenous police officers. We need more women police officers. We need more African American and now Muslim police officers. We need that.
You know what we need more than any other category you've listed? We need more
I don't think police is a solution. Huh?
We need more
competent. I think education is the solution, not police. I'm not agree about that.
Yeah, well, education. How do we educate? How do we educate the masses?
Yeah, but I ask them what they would like to learn.
How to survive right now. I think people want to know how to survive. People are really worried about.
Yeah, but get the money from Google, from Facebook, get the money from Spotify. They are thieves, you know. And from the army and everything, and then give it to people that they learn something good and they get food and somewhere to live, and then that's okay. That's right. That's the solution.
I don't disagree with that, but how do you implement it? How do you do that?
I think to build enlightenment and to end endemic racism, you need to search for leaders in every area of your culture, of your society, and franchise those people to create answers for their own problems, to create, to ask more questions and to seek more answers. That is the only way.
Well, right now it's about valuing that process to begin with, because the main success of the capitalist system is to devalue those virtues like education, which would actually lead somewhere. But right now people don't, look, a college student just wants to pass their exams and get their degree. They don't realize the value of the education. We have to remind people of this.
Yes, that's the point. That's the solution. The education gives the possibility to people to learn something they like, and then you solve the problem. Many problems.
But what about on a political level? Like, from a Canadian perspective, there are not nearly enough Indigenous members representing Canada.
Why is that?
I think probably ultimately as a result of education. So education, schools must become partners in franchising leadership opportunities for Indigenous persons.
Well, right now education is
marionette.
Excuse me. Right now education is limited by poverty, by affordability. So the quickest way to do that is make all higher education free. It's the quickest way to do it. All education is free.
In Europe, it's like that, you know. There is many things in the United States that they are very, very weird. No free hospital, no free education. People, it's crazy. But you can get a gun, but you cannot get the food. You can kill somebody, but you cannot learn something.
Well, Igor, tell me about Charlie Cobb's freedom schools in the early '60s.
Are you asking me? I don't know about Charlie Cobb's freedom schools.
No.
Well, here they were sort of asking questions, like you can ask a question, as Bill Ayers says, and seek a better answer.
Where I live in Sweden, in Järna, it's a center of anthroposophy. And the main idea of anthroposophy, if you have been heard about this, is to mix art, education, and nature. Those three things make things naturally.
I didn't know they were separate to begin with. I always assumed they were the same. I mean,
no, but we are very aware about those three things and working together, and it's making things moving on a very creative and very harmonic way. Then if you put any barriers and police and militaries and politicians. Politicians are only marionettes for the society. When you see how Trump how Trump is saying, it doesn't look very educated, this man.
No. It's, look, but you don't understand America enough to understand that
Maybe not.
education, that America is an anti-intellectual, anti-idea. The people, they don't like ideas because ideas take work to understand, and they prefer to say that everything's an opinion.
But that's a fault of education. Like, if there's no truth, Stephen Dempster says, then there's no shore. So we're in a rowboat in the middle of an ocean, and it doesn't matter which way we row.
Hey, each of us knows, we know what the truth is. And the truth is true if you really can experience it.
Let people innovate. Let people have visions. Let people think for the future. Maybe it's the wrong thing, but we did have this idea. We try it, and let people grow with thinking, maybe they're doing something good and something for the future. It's important. It's like an artist. An artist, when you
Yeah. But Fred, the only objection I have to what you're saying is that you keep talking about like somebody else is going to do it.
No, I do it myself. I tell you now, like an artist, when you begin a painting, you don't know what you're gonna do, and you push yourself and you begin to do it, and then things going on and evolving and have a vision. You know what those politicians, they don't have visions. There's only rules, no visions. There is rules and visions.
You know what can be done right now, though? We can rename your 20 Confederate. Sorry, Igor. I'm projecting this at America. We can rename your 20 Confederate officer named bases across your country. And what about Confederate statuary? What should be done with that? Because well, I see just as recent yesterday, Donald Trump is tweeting that there is a political benefit from supporting Confederate statuary and the names of these stupid names of these bases.
Fort Lauderdale.
What do you think? Get rid of it? Get rid of the names?
I just don't think that the issue has nothing to do with statues. It's distraction. You know, Trump is a master of distraction. He's a television performer. So basically, you know, I used to read his tweets, and then I realized that this was a routine. This was meant to occupy me, so that as a liberal or whatever, radical, whatever, I would be so busy shaking my pearl necklace and outraged by everything that Trump says that I wouldn't focus on what he's actually doing.
Stupid program in the TV. It's the same thing, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
occupy your mind with stupid things, you know.
Exactly. Whereas the real work is being done on a electoral basis in terms of fighting all of these class action suits that are trying to restrict voting, voter suppression. There's a huge war going on legally everywhere in the United States where people are making sure that specifically black votes matter. And so, you know, to making sure that we actually have an election. And
Obama was great yesterday.
He's a poet. Obama is someone who can use words in the way that I hope that artists can use their work to not just deliver a message, but to ignite the meaning of that message, to ignite it as a visceral experience in each one of your audience,
and also scripture, in a way that Donald Trump cannot do by just simply holding up a book.
Well, you know my old slogan: poetry is better than prayer because you don't have to pretend someone else is listening.
Okay. Can we finish on that? I'm hungry.
I'm not finished. I want to keep going. I want to keep going. It's only 11:25 in California.
Let me
You guys go to
just say,
sleep?
We've gone 1.5 hours now. We said 1 hour. So can we round it?
one more moment.
We put up the rules.
In Halifax, there was a statue of this guy named Edward Cornwallis. He was so good at killing Scots that they let him come to Canada to kill Mi'kmaq. Like he was in the Battle of Culloden in 1746 or whenever that was.
I wasn't there.
Yeah, well, your hair was.
What's the future? The future. How you see the future?
So there was this statue in Halifax,
Right.
and I think he had a policy of scalp collection, and I think that can you imagine? Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you fine. I wanted to say that that scalping was introduced to the Native Americans by Europeans.
Yeah, can you imagine being a Mi'kmaq today and walking by the statue of Edward Cornwallis?
I would
He paid,
probably
you know,
tear it
you know what I
down.
think he was paying for a child's scalp? Like a bottle of gin. A human being.
A child's scalp was worth a bottle of gin.
I don't know how to be more outraged at this moment. And it's not just because I've consumed a bottle of Zone 3 Malbec Shiraz from Argentina. It's just, what a fucking outrage. And how do I look my friend Doug in the eye, who's First Nations, and say this statue should be here? But in 2018, they fucking tore it down. They tore it down, they put it in a museum, and said what an asshole time it was, and what an asshole he was. And look at this in the context of like a Howard Zinn-like understanding of history. And here we have maybe the way forward.
Well, this is what mature people do, and this is why the challenge really is for both the pandemic and race. The challenge is to rise to the maturity of making the change, not just waiting for somebody else to make the change for you. But that's why the idea that you can just not like racism and that's okay has changed into, if you're not anti-racist, actively anti-racist, then you are part of the problem.
Right.
And this is what we all have to embrace as individuals, is that these problems can only become a crisis if we let other people make our decisions for us.